In this next learning target, we're going to continue our work with solving equations, but now we're going to extend that learning to working with some fractions. I know fractions can be a little overwhelming, intimidating, they cause some anxiety. I'm really hopeful though that in this learning target we can kind of get some confidence with fractions, especially since I'm going to let you use your calculators. You're going to be able to take your time. You'll have a few days for this learning target, so try and have an open mind about this and kind of think like you're starting fresh with fractions, okay? So I'm first going to teach you a little trick about fractions, and it's a concept that can be a little bit difficult to master. So like I've been telling you guys this whole time, those of you that have been coming up to me with your work, I've been telling you guys to please be organized, okay? Organization in this learning target is especially important. There are a lot of steps, and if you don't keep your work organized and neat, you're going to get lost in your own writing. It happens all the time. So we have to be really organized. I'm first going to show you this little trick about fractions that's going to last throughout the whole learning target. So, in general, people don't like to work with fractions. They're annoying, they're icky, they're just not ideal. So there's a trick that we can do to help us get rid of fractions. So let's take a look at 5/4 right here. I want to be able to turn 5/4 into a whole number. I want to get rid of the fraction. And so we can do that by actually multiplying this fraction by 4/1. Okay, and I'm going to get my calculator out to show you this, because we don't have to do fractions by hand. If we want to do fractions by hand, we can, but I'm always going to encourage calculator work here. So if I do 5/4, so I'm going to do parentheses 5 divided by 4 parentheses times parentheses 4 divided by 1. Okay, and I hit enter, all the fractions go away, and I'm just left with the whole number 5. This is really nice, right? Because now the fractions are gone, and I just get a whole number of 5. It's a really important trick in math of how we're being able to just eliminate denominators. Notice that when we did that, that 5 is the same number as the numerator here, okay? So what's really mathematically going on here and why we're getting this 5, I'll move my calculator over to this side a little bit so I can work with my right hand. What we're really doing to get that 5, and if we do fractions by hand, 5/4 times 4/1 is the same thing as saying 5 times 4 over 4 times 1. That's how fractions multiply. That's how when we multiply fractions, we multiply the top, we multiply the bottom. Okay, and what happens in a fraction is the 5, the 4 on top, and the 4 and 1 on bottom can be divided either way. I could do 5 divided by 1, I could do 5 divided by 4, and it would still work out fine. So if I take a look at this 4 and 4 on top here, and I put that 4 and 4 in my calculator, if I do 4 divided by 4 in my calculator, I end up getting the whole number 1. So what ends up happening is that those 4's cancel out to 1, so I get 5 times 1/1, which is really just the same thing as 5. So that's the math that's happening behind getting rid of your denominator, okay? So if I take a look at 4/6 and I say, well, I know that if I multiply this by the denominator, if I multiply that by 6, I know that those 6's will cancel out to 1, and I'll just be left with the 4. It's a really handy trick, and we can double check that in the calculator. 4 divided by 6, parentheses times 6. I know it's kind of hard to see. My calculator's a little dark. I don't know if I can make that brighter. There we go. That's a bit better. And hit enter. Oops, or hit clear. Sorry, let me try that again. 4 divided by 6 times 6. I end up getting that 4. The 6 goes away. So this little trick is something that we're going to carry through with us this whole learning target, okay? So the first type of problem I want to look at is a equation that just has one fraction, okay? So if I look at this equation right here, anything that has a denominator like this 10, that's considered a fraction, right? So this is an equation that has one fraction. So if I want to get rid of this, I'm going to draw my line like I always do. That's always our first step. But for every equation we really ever solve, draw your line, split that left side and that right side. And then just like we did up here at the top where I multiplied both sides by multiplied the fraction by the denominator, I'm going to do that same thing here. My denominator in this problem happens to be the number 10. So I'm going to multiply this side by 10, and I'm going to multiply this side by 10. And you want to write that out. You want to put times 10 on one side, times 10 on the other side. Okay, and now we're going to simplify. On the right side, just like we talked about up above a second ago, these 10s will cancel out. We just talked about that trick. They'll go away. On the left side, though, I actually have to do that math. What's 10 times 1? 10. And then on the right side, what's left over is actually everything in that numerator, that 3 plus n, so that just gets brought down. And now we've created an equation that has no fractions. It becomes a very simple equation now that we've been able to solve for the last couple learning targets, right? Now I just subtract the 3 on both sides. The 3's cancel out. 10 minus 3 is 7. I get n on the right side. I'm going to rewrite that with n on the left side. And I get n equals 7. Okay. The second example is very similar. The second example still has just one fraction, but it's got a couple other constants around it. So I'm going to draw my line like I always want to do. And my denominator in this case is negative 4. But I've also got this negative 8 here and this other negative 4 over here. The trick stays the same. My trick is still to multiply everything by that denominator. So I'm going to multiply this by negative 4. I'm going to multiply the negative 8 by negative 4, and I'm going to multiply the negative 4 by negative 4. When we multiply in an equation, we have to multiply every single term by that number. And I'm going to make a note of that. Multiply every term by the common denominator. Okay. So now we're going to take it one step at a time here. On this term, the k and the negative 4, these guys cancel out, and I'm left with just the k. So I'm going to bring the k down. Here, I've got a negative 4 times a negative 8. We can use our calculator to do that work. That's totally fine. In fact, I encourage it because I'm seeing a lot of, on masteries, especially in this unit, just a lot of arithmetic errors. We're just trying to do this stuff in our head and it's not working out. So even for something simple like a multiplication table problem, use your calculator. That's a positive 32. So I'm going to put plus 32 right here. And then negative 4 times negative 4 gives me a positive 16. Now I've eliminated all my fractions, and I've got a pretty simple equation here, where my next step is now to subtract the 32 on both sides. And I get that k equals whatever 16 minus 32 is. I'm going to use my calculator, negative 16. So k equals negative 16. Okay. So that's the kind of work we do when we're solving with just one fraction. You really need to multiply by the denominator. Okay, that's the key here. Multiply every term by the denominator. Okay, and notice that I showed that work. I showed that times 4, negative 4, by every single term in the equation. It's going to get a little bit trickier as we turn the page. I've got 3 more examples to show you. It's just going to get a little bit more, I want to say, like, intense, I guess. A little more, bigger numbers, more variables, but the concept stays exactly the same. That's really important. We're still multiplying by a denominator. So let's look at this equation with the p's in it. I notice that now I've got a bunch of fractions, but all these fractions have what denominator? Remember, if I have and I'll write this off to the side here actually, so in case we've forgotten what those terms mean. If I have a fraction, this is my numerator on top, and my denominator is on the bottom. Think of denominator starts with D, which means down. That's one like word association. So the top is your numerator, the bottom is your denominator. And when I have a problem with fractions, I draw my line, and then I look for a common denominator. In this problem, the only denominator is 3, so I'm going to take that 3, and I'm going to multiply it by every single term. So negative 5/3 times 3, negative 5/3 p times 3, and negative 10 thirds p times 3. Each term gets multiplied by 3 because we want to get rid of that denominator. What happens is, on the left, this 3 and this 3 cancel out, and I get negative 10p. Here, this 3 and this 3 cancel out, and I have negative 5p left. And on the far right, this 3 and this 3 cancel out, and I'm just left with the negative 5. Notice what I wrote left over were the numerators. The negative 10 was left over, the negative 5 was left over, and the negative 5 over here was left over. And then I didn't forget that there was a p attached to both of these fractions that I also had to bring down. So by multiplying by 3 to everything, I got rid of all the fractions. And now I've got an equation that looks very similar to what we've been doing in 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. Now I can combine like terms with this negative 10p and negative 5p into negative 15p. And on the right, I just bring down that negative 5. Last step here, divide both sides by negative 15. And I want you to be really careful here. I do not want you to put 3. It's very easy to see 15 and 5 in a problem and say, oh, that's definitely going to equal 3. But notice we've got a 5 on top and a 15 on bottom, so I want you to use your calculators. If I do negative 5 divided by negative 15, and in my calculator, I'm going to get a decimal. I don't want decimals as answers, so hit that math button, right? The math button here, this math button. Hit math. And then where it says it's already highlighted on fractions, so you're going to hit enter again, and it's going to tell you that's 1/3. So your answer to this problem is 1/3. For this learning target, you will get some fraction answers, and that's okay. Our calculators are able to convert decimals into fractions. I don't want decimal answers, okay? So we've got to be able to convert those into fractions. And we have calculators. We have the tools to do it, okay? All right, let's take a look at the next level. Okay, this one's a little trickier because now I've got 2 fractions, but one is a 4 in the denominator and one's an 8 in the denominator. So what number do I choose to multiply by? This one's tricky because you want to try and find a common denominator. And if you remember from middle school or elementary school, maybe you don't remember, and that's okay, I'll explain it now. A common denominator is a number that both numbers multiply into. I'll say that again. It's the number that both your numbers or 3 numbers or however many numbers will multiply into. So I look at 4 and I ask myself, okay, can 4 be a common denominator of 8? Can 8 multiply into 4? No, 8's too big. So then I look at 8. Can 4 multiply into 8? Yeah, 4 times 2. Can 8 multiply into 8? Yes, 8 times 1. So 8 is my common denominator. So just like the other problems, now I'm going to multiply every term by 8 by the common denominator. Okay? So here's what's going to happen. On the right side, the 8's cancel, just like we've been doing so far, and I'm left with just negative 29, right? Negative in front and the 29 on top. On the left side, I've got 8 times negative 2m, which is negative 16m. And then this one's the tricky one. What is 8 times 5 over 4? I'm not just doing 8 times 5, even though it kind of looks like that because those 2 numbers are next to each other. It's really 8 times this fraction, 5/4. So you can do it a couple ways. The easiest way, I think, is to use your calculator and just type into your calculator 8 times parentheses 5 divided by 4. Type it directly into there just like it looks in your equation. Hit enter, and you should get a whole number if you've picked the right common denominator. So I've got 10. So I'm going to write here that this is now plus 10m. Another way you can do this, and whatever works in your own mind, I don't care, but I'm just giving you another option. You can do 8 times 5 first. So you can do 8 times 5 and get 40, and then you can do 40 divided by 4 as that denominator. You'll still get 10 if you want to do it in 2 steps. Okay, it's up to you how you want to do it, how you want to think about it. You can also even do 8 divided by 4 and then times 5 and also get 10. So there's really several ways you can get this 10 mathematically. Okay, if you're in doubt of how I did these other two methods just now, use your calculator just to do 8 times the 5 divided by 4th parentheses method. Okay. Once you've cleared the denominators, now you solve it like you've been solving this unit. So negative 16m and 10m combine into negative 6m equals negative 29. This looks like you've probably done something wrong, but it's okay. In this unit, we are going to get weird fractions. Okay, so now I'm going to have a final answer. If you're not sure if 29 and 6 reduces, the calculator will tell you. So do 29 divided by 6, hit math, enter, enter. It doesn't reduce. I still get 29 over 6, so you're just going to leave your final answer as 29 over 6. Okay? And now for the trickiest problem. And the reason this is tricky is just because there's more things to multiply, truly. You've got 4 terms here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is displaying 4 different denominators. So we have to find the common denominator. The easiest way to find the common denominator really for me is I find the biggest number in the denominator, so here's 40, and I ask myself, do each of the other numbers go into that bigger number? Does 4 go into 40? Yes, 4 times 10. Does 8 go into 40? Yes, 8 times 5. And does 2 go into 40? Yes, 2 times 20. So that means that 40 can be my common denominator. So now that I know 40 is my common denominator, I'm going to mark times 40 to every single term. If you don't show this step and you come ask me for help, that's the first thing I'm going to make you do. I'm going to make you write out that step. You can't be doing this in your head. You need to show that common denominator multiplication, okay? So now this is what our calculators are for, because I don't know about you, but this is like a lot of multiplication and fractions. So we're going to do each one at a time here. I'm going to move this over and do it on the left here. Okay, so the first one is 40 times negative 11 fourths. And I get negative 110. So this becomes negative 110k. Next, I'm going to do 40 times negative 15 over 8. And I get negative 75. So there's my first 2 fractions eliminated. On the right, I'm going to do 40 times 1/2. And I get 20. So this becomes 20k. And for the last one, I could put this in my calculator, but I could also notice that the 40 and 40 will cancel out, and I'm just left with 159. But if you want to do 40 times 159 over 40, you can in your calculator, and it will still give you the 159. So if you just want to do all of the fractions in your calculator, you totally are welcome to do that. But if you want to take that shortcut and just say, hey, I know that those cancel out, you're totally fine to do that as well. Okay? Now we solve like normal. I'm going to get this 20k on the left, so I'm going to subtract 20k on both sides. These cancel out, and on the left side, I've got negative 110 minus 20. That's negative 130k. Bring down the 75, bring down the 159. Now I'm going to add the 75 over. These cancel out, and I get negative 130k, and I don't know what 159 plus 75 is in my head, so I have a calculator. It's 234. And then my last step is to divide by negative 130. Again, this looks wrong. You guys are used to having things like 10 divided by 2 and 8 divided by 4. Very simple whole number division that works out really neat and nicely. For this learning target, you're going to get kind of crazy weird numbers. But that's what we have our calculator for. So I type 234 divided by negative 130 into my calculator. I get this decimal, which I want to convert into a fraction, and I get negative, oh, I can't see that very well. That says 9/5. Kind of hard to see because of the glare, but that is a 9. So negative 9/5. And that's my answer. Okay. Notice again in the very beginning of this learning target, I said how organized and neat your work should be. If you come to me and need help and I can't read your work or I can't see what your steps are, it's really hard for a teacher to try and correct your thinking. Really hard, right? Like the goal is for you to learn how to do this correctly and be good at it. And you all are 100% capable of this. But something that you've got to make sure you do is be really neat and precise with your work. I should be able to see, oh, you wrote -110 minus 20, but you put down that that's 90. I know instantly, oh, you just made a subtraction error. If you just put some numbers here and I don't have any context, I can't help you as easily. Okay, so try really hard to be organized. That's a struggle for a lot of you, and I think that's okay. It's a struggle. That's what you're in school for. That's what we're here for. But that's something I really want us to strive towards, is being really organized and clear with our thinking. Okay. You've got several days to this learning target. I'm not expecting this to be done in one day or maybe even 2 days. This might take 3 days to get all these problems done, and that's okay. I'm here to help you. You've got another teacher in the room here to help you as well, Mrs. Fink or Mrs. Wright. So take the time, ask questions, and learn the material, okay? You guys got this. Good luck.